Yes, Chair, it's already 11 o'clock.
Okay, no, proceed. I had a problem with my other computer. I had to borrow another computer. You can open the meeting, Coach.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, members, colleagues. Welcome to our meeting today. You remember that earlier this week, we received a report from Equally Education where we said we also going to deal with those matters. Today we are continuing with our getting briefings. Today we'll be getting a briefing from our content advisor, Sisanda, who is going to take us through, members, in terms of the submission. You remember how important those submissions. We will take into account from the legacy report. They presented that one to us. Today, she is going to take us through on what was presented, and I'm sure she's also going to advise us as to which one we might consider as a priority going forward. Members and colleagues, may I once more welcome you all in our meeting. We are starting now. Today is the 11th of November 2020. The meeting starts at 11 o'clock. So I want now members to go through our agenda point and check if pilot, are there any apologies?
Chairperson, I may be intermittent as I've got electricity problem.
Sorry?
I may be intermittent as I have electricity problems.
Okay.
What did he say?
I wanted me to discuss with you finish.
So basically, you want to be excused early or what?
No. If I disappear, I've disappeared because of challenges.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah. Thank you.
We noted, Komitonga, your apology. Any other apology? Did you receive any apology, pilot? Pilot?
Chair?
Yes.
Yes. Please can you note an apology from Honorable Miki Lakas and Honorable Lotrit?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. They are noted. Any other apology, colleagues? Thanks, Mimi. We note those one. It seems, pilot, have you received any other apology in writing to you? Is pilot in? No. Can I take it, members, that there are only 3 apologies for today. Without yes. Okay. Let's continue, members.
Sorry, Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to disturb you. Can you please note an apology from Honorable Orkamp as well? Willie Orkamp.
Okay. From?
Willie Orkamp, Honorable Orkamp.
Oh, Honorable Orkamp. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mimi. Those are noted. Members, I take it that there's no any further apology. Am I correct? Thank you very much. Let's move members, we will now, but I would like to check as to who are our guests in the platform. Maybe I will start with the members to introduce themselves so that we know for record purposes who was here and who's not here. Let me start with the members. Comrade Donga.
Muhammad Dango present.
Thank you. Who's the next one?
Honorable Dr. Gondwe, present, Chair.
Thank you. The chairperson.
Co-chairperson is here, Chair.
Thank you very much. Who else is here?
I see, Chair, there is my bong. I don't know who is my bong, Makina. Where my bong is from. Maybe you can introduce himself.
Who's my bong on?
Journalist. I'm working for Independent. Can you hear me, Honorable?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I'm observing the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then who else is here? Sandra?
I'm also chair. I'm also here, honorable chairs and members. Good morning.
Morning, morning.
My name is Sisanda Sipamla. I'm the content advisor of the committee.
Thank you very much. Sure. I see there's somebody. Who else is here?
There is PMG, Chair, but I think that's about it, and Esme.
Okay, I can see PMG. Yeah. Because it's important, members, to know who is in the platform, because some names we don't know, and we might have people attending the wrong meeting here. But who else is here?
Yeah, that's about it, Chair.
Is that about it?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Pilot. Members, I take it that our meeting is continuing. Let me, without waste of time, allow Sisanda to take us through the submission for today. Thereafter, we will then have some deliberation, and then our meeting will be closed. Thank you very much. Let me hand over to Sisanda to take us through.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Chairpersons. Good morning, members, and good morning, staff members and people, all the people in the meeting. Today, I will be taking the committee through the formal tabling of all the submissions which the committee has received during our invite to the public for submissions in May this year. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but this presentation, it is a summary of the executive document which was sent to members. There is no additional information on this PowerPoint. It's just a means of presenting the document which was sent to members in an easier way. So on slide 2, we have the contents page, which sets out how I will be presenting this document. There will be a background. There will then be a discussion of the categorization of the submissions as discussed with members. And then there will also be the presentation then of the 58 submissions which have been received by the committee. And then I will conclude. There's also a table of submissions, but then I will be referring members to page 42 of the document which was sent to them for that. However, today we're going to be focusing then on presenting and formally tabling all submissions which have come through to the committee. So moving on to...
Sorry, Sandra, I just want to check if the slide is projected. Can all members see the slides?
Yes, can see the slide.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Pilot. Thank you. On page 3 of the slides, I'm taking the members through the background, which just sets out that the committee is established in terms of the Constitution, section 45(1)(c), and that the parliamentary joint rules, Rule 102, Rule 101 to 103, speak to the powers and functions and the decision-making of this committee. And also briefly, in May, the public responded to an invitation which was put in the public media and made submissions to the committee on any constitutional matter which they felt they wanted to express themselves on. In this regard, the committee received 58 email submissions which were received. These 58 submissions also included 2 duplicate submissions, 1 retracted submission, and also 1 legacy submission, namely the equal education submission, which was considered during the last meeting. It is important for the committee to be aware of every single submission which has come through and also take note of the duplicates and those that have been retracted for purposes of procedural accuracy, as people of the public will contact the committee and perhaps the committee will want to call the people to come make public hearings, and therefore the committee needs to be clear as to which document members of the public are referring to. All these submissions have been referenced and have been uploaded on the parliamentary intranet called El Fresco and are categorized under the committee's name. And all members have access to that El Fresco in order to see the original submissions as they were submitted. However, this is just a summary to assist members to better process this information. Moving on to slide 4, the categorization as discussed with the committee decided that it is all right for us to work in this method, that we will categorize the submissions into 3 categories, where submission category 1 denotes submissions which are not in line with our committee mandate and do not speak to how we do our work, because people of the public perhaps are just expressing their views and dissatisfaction on a multitude of matters that concern the Constitution. However, members of the public are expected in terms of our rules to propose which section in the Constitution they want to review and also just give reasons substantiating their request. There's then category 2 submissions, which are submissions which I foresee will require a parliamentary legal opinion. This is on the basis of them being technical in nature and will assist the members with their deliberations, and also to give members clarity as to whether they would like to call any other stakeholders who are implicated or are part of the submission which is being submitted to the committee. And also category 2 submissions may be that category where members feel they would like to call the public or the people who've made those submissions to come present before it. And then there's also category 3 submissions, which are straightforward submissions and submissions which have been categorized in a manner that members will be able to deliberate with them on the basis of the way they have been submitted. However, this is just a recommended way of working. Members then during their deliberations after the presentation can advise on what changes that they would like to see in terms of the recommended categorization. So in a nutshell, the committee reviews the submissions to assess the favorability or the desirability which may possibly result in an amendment to the Constitution. And then the committee will then make its recommendation, saying that they have consulted the member of the public, they have consulted relevant stakeholders, and they've also received a legal opinion. And the committee is then of a view that it is a favorable desirability for that section of the Constitution to be changed. And then this is put in a recommendation report, which is made to Parliament at the end of this process. Slide 5 then begins with the 58 submissions. Slide 5 reflects submission 1 through to submission 3. I will now officially table the submissions as received in a chronological order by the committee. Submission 1 was received from Robert Wessener. Robert Wessener expresses that he's concerned about the amendment of the Constitution which will allow the South African Police Service to conduct a search of private persons without obtaining a warrant. Robert Wessner had phrased his submission in a way where he said with a warrant, but he actually intended to say without a warrant when you go on to read the rest of his submission in the email. It is recommended that this submission be categorized under category 3 of submissions, which are those which are ready for the committee to consider, as it expresses a concern against a prospective constitutional amendment, which is also then addressed in existing national legislation. The basic principles of criminal procedure are constitutionalized in the Bill of Rights, namely the Criminal Procedure Act and the South African Police Service Act are authorized to conduct searches without having a warrant under reasonable circumstances. The committee may then also advise Mr. Wessner to refer to the Portfolio Committee on Police, wherein it is discussing amendments to the South African Police Act, because this is where those changes will be made. And the recommendation to the committee is that submission 1 does not necessitate a review and amendment of the Constitution per se. Moving on to submission 2. Submission 2 was submitted by Osem Sang Moloko, and she submits for the review of Chapter 9 to legislate the appointment of internal auditors in the Constitution in order to allow for more transparency. The submitter in the submission argues that there should be 4 pillars of government instead of 3 pillars in order for internal auditors to be independent in organizations and to be separate from board members and from management. This amendment is requested so that internal audit reports form part of organizational annual reports, thereby allowing the public to access these internal auditor reports. It is recommended to the committee that it then receives a legal opinion on this proposal because of its technical nature, and also to assist the committee in assessing its desirability in amending the Constitution. Moving on to submission 3, which is still on slide 5. It was submitted by Catherine Walters, and she requests an amendment of national legislation, and she names the legislation in her submission, which is the Disaster Management Act and the Emergency Powers Act. It is recommended to the committee that the submitter be advised that the committee does not make amendments or review national legislation, and therefore this submission falls under category 1 of submissions, which is one which is not within the committee's mandate. Moving on to submissions 4 through to submission 6, which is on slide 6 as displayed on our presentation slides. Submission 4 is by Tlutso Nchulane, who submitted for the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution with the effect of the repealing the 1913 Land Act. And it is recommended that this submission be categorized under category 3, which is a submission which is ready for the committee to consider, and advice is that the submitter should be written to and informed of the progress that the Fifth Parliament Committee has done on this work and the current work that is being done by the ad hoc committee, which has then promulgated the draft amendment bill. Moving on to submission 5. Submission 5 was submitted by Kim Finkelstein, and she submits that she does not wish to see the Constitution amended. It is recommended then that this submission forms part of category 1 submissions, which do not form part of the mandate of the committee. Submission 6 is by Andries, and Andries submits for the review of Section 89B on the removal of the president. And he says that this will strengthen accountability provisions because they are currently vague. Andries would also like to see a review of Section 96, which will add consequences for non-compliance and criminal sanctions for serious misconduct by the president, the executive, and members of parliament. Andries would also like to see a review of Section 19 on the political rights, and would also like to have Section 19 added with a subparagraph 4, which will state that every citizen has a right to transparent and accountable government by the government. It is also then recommended that this submission be referred to legal services, and it falls under category 2 of our categorization. Moving on to slide 7. Slide 7 displays submission 7 through to submission 7 through to submission 10 of 2020. Submission 7 was submitted by Mr. Yannick Posson. He submitted that he does not wish to see the Constitution amended. It is recommended to the committee that all submitters who just expressed their view that they would not like to see the committee, excuse me, members, there's no way I can avoid the sound that's coming now, but it's going to stop shortly. So I was expressing to members that all submitters who have requested that they do not wish to see the Constitution amended, that we categorize these under category 1 submissions, which denote submissions which are not within the mandate of the committee. However, the committee will take note of every member of the public's expressed desire that they would not like to see the Constitution amended. Submission 9 was submitted by Mr. Freeman Bengu, who submitted on the need for a law which excludes refugees and asylum seekers from participating in political activities. This submission can be considered under national legislation, namely the Refugee Amendment Act 33 of 2008, and it also does not necessitate a review of the Constitution. It is therefore recommended that it also fall under category 1, and that the submitter can be informed that any changes to this law can be made in the enabling laws, which is the Refugee Amendment Act. Submission 10 is by Wasila Jardine, who submits for the inclusion of the death penalty. And this is simply the statement that is put in the submission. However, we know that the death penalty is under the right to life, and it is something that is provided for within the Constitution. It is recommended that this submission form part of the category 3 submissions which are ready for consideration. And the advice in this regard is that capital punishment was abolished in South Africa in 1995 by the ruling of S versus Mokonyana by the Constitutional Court. And although there is popular sentiment favoring the reinstatement of the death penalty, it is, according to research, not a conclusive, it has not been found that it's conclusive evidence to prove that the death penalty is a more deterrent than the existing sanction of life imprisonment, which is in place in South Africa. Moving on to slide 8, which discusses submissions 11 through to submissions 15 of 2020. Submission 11 was submitted by Patrick Leonard, who expresses that he does not wish to see the Constitution amended, which would then fall under the category of submissions which are not within the committee's mandate. Submission 12 is by Kiara Lewis, who also does not wish to see the Constitution amended. Submission 13 is by Ms. T. Ferreira, who also does not wish to see the Constitution amended. And all of these submissions then just fall under a category of submissions which will be noted by the committee, but do not fall within the mandate of reviewing sections in the Constitution. Submission 14 is by Ms. Louise Boyes, and she submitted for the removal of any provision in the Constitution which excludes a full parliament from decision-making during disaster management, and that a decision on a national lockdown should be decided in consultation with the public. It is recommended that this submission is ready for consideration by the committee and can be accommodated in national legislation, namely the Disaster Management Act and its accompanying regulations. The objective of disaster management is to avoid and mitigate or manage the impact of potential hazards and does not require the Constitution to be amended. Moreover, South Africa has to and is obliged to adhere to all international obligations during a time of national disaster. Moving on to submission 15, which is by James Art, who also just expresses that he does not wish to see the Constitution amended, and therefore that falls under those submissions which are not within line of the committee's mandate. Moving on to slide 9. Slide 9 discusses submissions 16 to 20. Submission 16 is by Patrick Dixon, who does not wish to see the Constitution amended. Submission 17 is by Avis Renz, who also does not wish to see the Constitution amended. Submission 18 is by Fiona Cameron, who has written to the committee to express that they do not want to have the Constitution reviewed or amended. Submission 19 is by an Etienne Booker, who also expresses that they do not wish to see the Constitution amended. And all of these submissions then do not fall within the mandate of our operations. Submission 20, however, is by Chris Blaine, who submits for an amendment revoking the right to equality that allows for racial discrimination during disaster management and for the receival of tenders. The submitters of the view that the BBBE Act should be repealed, and that the Constitution should not allow for fair discrimination. The committee is then advised in this regard. The submitters of the view that the law needs to be changed to focus on equal opportunity, and that the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act is a comprehensive South African anti-discrimination law. It prohibits unfair discrimination, but employment discrimination is excluded from the ambit of this act because of the employment equity. This submission does not necessitate an amendment of the Constitution, because South Africans, BBBE and all this legislation that speaks to the matters that have been raised by this submitter fall under the South African constitutional framework, and it's an important consideration. These acts or national laws have not been repealed by the Constitutional Court, and therefore are still within operation, and would therefore indicate to the committee that it doesn't necessitate an amendment of the Constitution. Moving on to slide 10. Slide 10 discusses submissions 21 through to 26. And submission 21 is by Nicole Terbranch, and she submitted that the Constitution should not be amended. Submission 22 is by Russell Warwick, who submitted that the Constitution should also not be amended. Submission 23 is by Phoebe Daniels, who submitted that the Constitution should also not be amended. Submission 24 is by Willie Customs, who submitted that the Constitution should not be amended. Submission 25 is by Johan Christen, who submitted that the Constitution should not be amended. All these submissions are recommended to fall then under category 1, where submitters will be informed that the committee takes note of their views, but however, their submissions do not fall within the mandate of the committee's work. Submission 26 is by Ms. Olivia White, who submitted that convicted offenders should not enjoy the same rights as law-abiding citizens, and request that a publication of proposed changes to the Constitution be put forward in the media for the public to make comments on. It is recommended that this submission is Ms. Olivia expressing her views of how Parliament should operate in terms of getting public input. It does not speak to a section in the Constitution which requires amendment, and therefore it is not within the committee's mandate to consider this submission. However, the committee takes note of Ms. Olivia's views in this regard. Slide 11 displays submissions 27 through to 29. Submission 27 is by Mr. Petrus Klassen, who submitted against any changes to the Constitution. Submission 28 is by Rita Dimney, who objects to the suggested variations in the Constitution to enable the South African Police Service to search people, their property or possessions without a warrant. This submission is noted as a statement which also does not provide the committee with a section which it needs to change, and speaks to a prospective change to the Constitution which has not been effected as yet. Therefore, this submission falls under category 1 of submissions, which is not in line with the committee's mandate. However, the committee notes the concerns of the submitter. Submission 29 is by Ms. Belcher, who objects to constitutional changes which will affect the rights of citizens, employees, homeowners, parents, and also adversely affect the right to privacy. Submission 29 is also not within the mandate of the committee, as it is a statement and not a proposed review of clauses in the Constitution. Moving on to slide 12. Slide 12 displays submissions 30 through to 32. Submission 30 is by Ms. Yolandi Tesna, who also submits an objection to any amendment to the Constitution, and therefore the committee can note her submission, but it does not fall within our mandate. Submission 31 is by Mr. John Wilkinson, who submits and comments on legislation, namely the Independent Police Investigation Directorate Amendment Bill, asking whether the President has signed this legislation into law and submitted a new article on the South African Defence Force deployment and command. It is recommended that this submission also does not fall in line with the committee's mandate and therefore can just be noted as information, but however, it does not assist the committee with doing the work that it does in terms of its mandate. Submission 32 is by Kutso SK of the Balu Dogma NPC, who submitted on the recognition of Kilubedu as an official language under Section 6.1 of the Constitution. It is recommended that the committee consider inviting the submitter to the committee to express themselves fully on the merits of their submission. And also, prior to that, it is also advisable for the committee to get a direction from a legal opinion from Parliamentary Legal Services in order to understand the desirability in a clearer way, and then continue then to invite the submitter and also any other relevant stakeholders who are involved in the process of making a language an official language. This will all support the committee's deliberations in order to decide on the desirability of what is proposed in the submission. Moving on to slide 13. Slide 13 displays submissions 33 to 35. Submission 33 is by the South African Secular Society. They have submitted that despite the Equality Clause in Section 9 prohibiting discrimination by the state on the basis of religion and belief, the preamble in the Constitution still makes a reference to God, and this is unconstitutional and should be removed. It is recommended that this submission be categorized under submissions under category 2 submissions, which requires a legal opinion. However, the committee can note that fair discrimination is permissible within reasonable grounds, and that what the submitter is speaking to, it does not adversely affect it doesn't adversely affect a group, and therefore it should not be seen as something which necessitates an amendment of the Constitution. However, the committee can request a legal opinion in order to have a legal response to how it will decide on this proposal. Submission 34 is by Martin Thunderstein, who is from First Market Foundation. Mr. Thunderstein appreciates the Constitution. However, he requests an impact assessment on public policy. He also discusses constitutionalism standards for governance and makes suggestions on how Section 36, which is the limitation clause, and Section 37, which is the derogation provisions, ought to operate during a state of national disaster. On reading the submissions made by Mr. Thunderstein, it is recommended that the committee seek a legal opinion on his inputs on how these two competing sections should work with each other. And therefore, this submission is categorized as a category 2 submission. Submission 35 is by a Professor Zulu of Howard College, who has submitted to make and requested the committee to make a written and oral presentation to the committee on the operation of Section 6 on the use of official languages. Because Professor Zulu has requested to make a written and oral presentation and has not actually submitted their presentation as other submitters have, it is recommended that the committee advise the submitter to then make a written submission first, so that the committee can assess a way forward with regard to what they would come present when they are given the opportunity to come present. And therefore, this submission is recommended to fall under category 1 as one which can be noted, but however, it does not give the committee a clear direction on also fairness in treating the other submitters who have already given a full submission in writing of what they would like to discuss before the committee. It is also advisable for the committee to decide it, because we are still dealing with a matter of languages. If there is a professor from a college who can advise the committee on this matter, perhaps the committee can call Professor Zulu on an advisory capacity as someone who's an expert in the field to enlighten it during the time of consideration of official language submissions. Moving on to slide 14. Slide 14 discusses submission 36 through to 38. Submission 36 is by Mr. Senior Counsel Paul Hoffman. The council works for the Institute of Accountability in South Africa, and he has submitted for a new Chapter 9 institution, which will strengthen the eradication of corruption. Mr. Hoffman has presented on numerous occasions in the previous parliaments to the committee, but however, he feels that the committee should invite him, as he would like to speak to the details that he's given in his submission on the strengthening of the agencies, the security agencies which eliminate corruption. It is therefore recommended that the committee categorize his submission under category 2, where his detailed submission will be provided to legal services to just give the committee a direction as to whether it necessitates calling the submitter and whether his proposals warrant the desirability of amending the Constitution. Moving on to submission 37, which is by Ms. Wasila Jardine, who submits for the removal of blacklisting of individuals, as this has a negative impact on the future of official endeavors and prospective employment. It is advised that this submission fall under category 1, which is also a submission that does not relate to clauses that need to be changed to any clause in particular in the Constitution. And therefore, the committee can note the submission, but however, is not able to move forward on it in terms of its mandate. Submission 38 is by Graham Smith, who submits that the Constitution is adequate as it is and does not require any review or amendment. The submission can also be noted as one which is not in line with the committee's mandate, but however, the committee welcomes the views of the public on how the Constitution status is. Submissions 39 through to 40 are on slide 15. Submission 39 is by Louis Boyce, who wishes to have the disaster management or anything with which diminishes the full power of Parliament being included in decisions removed from the Constitution. This submission is ready for consideration by the committee and therefore categorized under category 3 submissions. And the advice to committee is that the state of national disaster is spoken to in terms of the National Disaster Act and the applicable regulations. And it has a far-reaching impact on people's rights, but they are finely balanced against people's constitutional rights. However, the limitations are permissible if they are done in line with the limitation clause. The advice is that then this submission does not necessitate a review of the Constitution, but that the submitter can be written to with advice on how this matter can be addressed without changing the Constitution. Submission 40 is by Ms. Desiree Lotter, who submits that the Constitution should be changed to reflect that anyone who has been investigated for corruption or fraud or tender tampering should not be allowed to hold a position of power. This submission is also one which is ready for consideration by the committee. South Africa is a constitutional state where the rule of law through the existing national legislation ensures that persons or organizations accused of transgressing the law are charged and investigated accordingly. Moving on to slide 16. Slide 16 discusses submissions 42 through to 43, submissions 41 through to 43. Submission 41 is by Marius Ace and who expresses that they do not wish to have the constitution amended. Their submission is noted and falls under category 1. Submission 42 is by Johnson Rogers, who also submitted a view against the amendment of the Constitution, which submission is noted and falls under category 1. Submission 43 is by Adrian Davis, which submitted for the review of chapter 12 of the Constitution on traditional leaders, and this submitter wants the abolishment of unelected persons from holding power or accessing state or provincial resources like land worked by or inhabited by other people on the basis of hereditary title. The recommendation is that this submission falls under category 3 and is a matter considered and passed into law under national legislation. It is advised that the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Amendment Act 2 of 2019 is legislation which has been passed into law through a consultative process which gives effect to Section 211 of the Constitution, providing for the recognition of the institution's status and the role of traditional leaders in according to customary law, which is also all subject to the Constitution. Moving on to slide 17, which discusses submissions 44 through to 46. Submission 44 is by Warren van Niekerk, who submits that he disapproves of the Disaster Management Act and he would like every political party to have representation in decisions which are adding parliament must be explicitly involved in decisions of putting the country into a lockdown during a state of national disaster. It is recommended that this submission fall under category 1 of submissions, which is not within the mandate of the committee, as the proposal can be considered under national legislation, namely the Disaster Management Act. Submission 45 is by Ashley Weatherdon, who submits on the disapproval of Ms. Weatherdon submits on her disapproval of the ban on liquor and cigarettes during the national state of disaster. Again, Ms. Ashley Weatherdon's views are noted. However, the submission does not fall within the mandate of the committee's work. Submission 46 is Matandazon Ndlovu Hlahla, who submits on behalf of Oxfam South Africa, and they submit that they would like an oral presentation of their written submission to the committee on the need to amend and align the Electoral Act with the Gonyama Act. This matter is currently before Parliament and is being considered by the COCTA committee, and the submission can be written to in order to follow up on that committee's work. The submitter can also be advised on matters pertaining to the Electoral Act and the Gonyama Act, as the Committee on Home Affairs is currently considering electoral matters, and perhaps this submitter can be advised to keep track of any joint meetings that take place with regard to how these two pieces of legislation work together. Moving on to slide 18, which then discusses submissions 47 through to 49. Submission 47 is by Fungani Moya, which submits who submits that they oppose SEPs having a right to search someone's house or car without a warrant. The submission also falls under category 1 submissions, which are not within the mandate, because the submission expresses an opinion and is not a proposal for a constitutional amendment or amending a section in the Constitution. Submission 48 is one which the committee needs to note as a duplicate submission because it is identical to submission 2 of 2020, which has already been submitted. Duplicate submissions are recommended to fall under category 1 as they are also technically not in line with the committee's mandate. Submission 49 is by Mr. Ian Coltrane, who submits his strong opposition to the amendment of the Constitution to allow for SEPs to conduct searches without a warrant. This submission falls under category 3 of submissions, which are ready for consideration And the advice to the committee is that the courts continue to interpret the Constitution in a way that vindicates basic human rights. The submission is one that can be catered for in national legislation, namely the South African Police Service Act and the Criminal Procedure Act. However, the Johannesburg High Court has made a ruling against warrant searches and gave Parliament 2 years to appropriately amend these pieces of national legislation which are referred to in the submission. Therefore, the submitter can be written to and advised on the progress with regard to their proposal. Slide 19 discusses submission 50 to 52. Submission 50 is a request, a correction of a grammatical error, and is the same submission which was made by Mr. Ian Coltrane. And therefore, this submission falls under category 1. However, the committee needs for procedural accuracies to note every single submission that comes through to the committee. And they need to be tabled, and the committee must take note of even the requests for changes of errors so that there is no complications later on when submitters are not clear on which submission they would like to come present, should they be invited to come present. Submission 51 is also a duplicate submission, which is submitted by the same submitter who submitted submission 4 of 2020, and it is recommended that it be eliminated and then replaced with submission 4 of 2020, and therefore falls under category 1 and should be eliminated. Submission 52 is the submission by Equal Education. It's the same submission which the committee had during the legacy. It was on the review of section 100, and the committee has considered this submission. The submission does fall under category 2 as the committee has received a legal opinion on it. And what the only thing remaining now is for the committee to deliberate and decide on the desirability of the proposal made in that submission. Slide 20 is discussing submission 53 to 54. Submission 53 is by Mr. Justin Bolton, who made 2 submissions. The first submission is in 2 parts. The first part, the submitter submits for the review of the Constitution in order to make additions to sections 1, which is the strengthening of the sovereignty by excluding the World Health Organization from overriding the Constitution. He would also like a review of section 2 to insert a ruling party to the constitutionally justify any actions it takes within 7 days. He'd also like to see a review of section 11 on the right to life, to refuse forced euthanasia. He would also like to see section 12 of the Constitution to include the right to self-defense and the right to bear arms. He would also like to see a review of section 14 to include the right to the right to track serious crimes using metadata for investigations. He would also like a review of section 27 of the Constitution to include the fact that government cannot force vaccination, and that euthanasia must end up being up to the individual or up to the family and not decided by the government. He would also like to see a review of section 35, which is the right of a person who is detained under quarantine. That person should be protected and cannot lose their job or be kicked out of their property or lose their income or vehicle or be blacklisted on account of being quarantined. He would also like a review of section 38 so that it reflects the state must set up an organization within the judiciary to assist people in approaching the courts to report human rights abusers, especially during the lockdown state of national disaster. It is recommended that Mr. Bolton's submission be referred to legal services for a legal opinion in order to assist committee deliberations. Submission 54 is also a submission from Mr. Bolt, who then makes a different and separate proposal for the inclusion of the right not to self-incriminate and the inclusion of a legal way to end the national state of disaster and not leave it up to one particular minister. It is also recommended that this submission falls under category 2 of submissions and be referred to a legal opinion. The second last page is slide 21, which also reflects then submission 58, submission 55 through to 58. Submission 55 is a duplicate submission, which the committee needs to take note of. It is identical to submission 54 of 2020, and it's the committee should then eliminate submission 55 and recognize submission 54 of 2020. Submission 56 is by Mark Kosman, who submits his objection to SEBS searching without warrants. This submission falls under category 3 and is a matter which can be referred to the Portfolio Committee on Police for consideration, as it is a matter which deals with the South African Police Service Act, which is national legislation. The submitter can then be advised in that way so as to understand that it does not fall within the mandate of amending the Constitution. Submission 57 is by Claudia Mirino, who submits also against warrantless searches. This also falls under category 3 and is a matter which can be referred to the PC on Justice and does not necessitate an amendment of the Constitution. The last submission is by Mr. Romalo Nadio, who submits for a review of Section 18 and Section 22, so that the state does not favor advocates who belong to a voluntary private association over practitioners who practice independently. He also would like to see a review of Section 34 on the access to courts to include private arbitration, and that it be cross-referenced with Section 171 on court procedure and Section 173 on the inherent powers of the courts. Moving on to the second last slide, which continues with submission 58. The submitter would also like to see Section 174, subsection 5 on the appointment of judges be clarified in the Constitution because he feels it is vague. He would like to see Section 178, subsection 1E and J on the JSC, that this section be amended so that independent sole practitioner are also considered for appointment within the JSC, because currently he says this is not the status of how things work. He would also like to see a review of Section 37, which he would like that it be amended and delete the word or the connecting word "and" between subsection 37(1)(a) and 1B, and be replaced with the word "or." He would like clarity on the constitutional powers given to the president during the national state of disaster. He would also like to see a review of Section 42(6). He would like it to be amended to provide clearly for members of parliament to be able to assist, to be able to sit in person or separately in different provinces, as well as to meet via remote or digital platform in line with the 4th Industrial Revolution. He would also like to see Section 27(1)(b), that it must be amended to add a provision that the state must ensure that within a year that pit lentries are eradicated everywhere in the Republic. It is also recommended that this long submission be referred to legal in order to assist the committee in its deliberations. And now I'm on the last slide, members. The conclusion is that the committee is advised to take note of every single submission it has received. The committee is advised to consider its satisfaction with the categorization in order for us to then process all the submissions accordingly. It is recommended that the committee first consider legal opinions where necessary in order to support its deliberation, and also consider inviting submitters who have requested to make submissions to the committee, and so that the committee has clarity on any possible questions it may have based on the original submissions which submitters put forward to the committee. The committee may also invite relevant stakeholders and experts on submissions it deems necessary to support its deliberations, where it feels there's a favorable desirability to amend the Constitution. After considering and deliberating on all submissions, the committee will then make its desirability recommendation on each submission in its recommendation report, which it will then present to Parliament. Thank you, members. That is the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Sisanda. Members, here is the presentation that has been tabled to us for deliberation. But in short, members, let's concentrate on the three main categories that the presentation was all about. The first one, there are issues that were raised, submission that were under submission category 1. Those are the issues that we must agree, members, as to what do we do with it, because clearly to me, these are the issues that we must not take a lot of time with those issues. So what is important right now is to agree with the categorization of the issues that has been tabled. If you feel that there are submission that had fall on the wrong category, maybe let's look into that as well, so that when we adopt the categorization, we know as to which one exactly do we want to deal with. Because there are those which falls under category 1, to me, that are non-issues that for now, that we cannot spend a lot of time on those issues. It's a matter of agreeing that those issues, they fall under category 1. Yes, they are placed in a right order, and we put them there. 2 is the one that are looking, that need us, which fall under category 2 submission. Those one, it will assist us where we need more, where we need to call in or invite those stakeholders to come and present to us. Again, it has been summarized towards the end of the report, of the notes, where it shows how many of those issues and which are those issues that need us to deal with them. I think that's where we must take most of our time. And lastly are the issues that were submitted under category 3. Category 3, those are the matters that we need to process. Members, this is the presentation that Sisanda just presented to us. And there are those individual or groups that have submitted their presentation where they suggest that it would be important for us just to engage with them further and get the understanding of their presentation. I'm not sure, members, whether I'm trying to summarize my summary, assist the committee in terms of these matters.
Co-chair.
Yes, Chair.
I think we have done very well, but that we should also thank Sisanda for the brilliant work done. I think both of you have laid a very foundation for us to move forward as you propose.
Thank you so much, Chair. May I have any other input from members? That for now, colleagues, let's agree on the categorization, because to me that is what is important here, so that when we start to deliberate and deal with these matters, we don't go back and say, but this matter, it was supposed to be in category 3. How did it fall out? Sisanda, is that helping? Is that helpful?
Yes, Chairperson. The idea is that for now, members must be satisfied with the ones which we would like to refer, so that members are able to get more legal input into what the submitter is saying. And also, I would like members to first listen to what the legal advisors say before we invite the submitters, because it will give us more of a legal stance on the desirability, so that by the time we are calling the submitter, we are able to give input from a legal perspective and input as well. And therefore, yes, Chair, if we agree now on the categorization, will we be able to respond to the category 1 submitters which fall out of the committee's mandate, which would mean that we are taking care of that entire category, where we write back to submitters and we inform them where their matters need to be referred to a PC, to a portfolio committee, or where their matters are not in line with the committee, we just explain to them, or where they are discussing section 25 on the amendment on the land matter, we refer them to an update of what Parliament is doing, and therefore we eliminate that group or category of submissions. Then we'll be left with hearing the legal opinions, and then once we've heard the legal opinions, members can collectively decide whether they would like to call submitters, all submitters, or maybe the ones who've requested, and thereafter members will have then a table of what is before them, and they will then either decide yes or no, is it desirable or is it not desirable, based on all the inputs which will assist us to arrive at those decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Sisanda. Here we are, members. Let me hear your views.
Chair?
Yes.
Yes, let me also start by appreciating the document that Sisanda put together. It's very comprehensive. And I want to say thank you, because it makes our life easier. I just have one, okay, as regard the categorization, I don't have a problem with the categorization. I'm quite happy with the way she's categorized them, but I'm a bit worried that 33 of the submissions that we've received actually fall outside our mandate. So I think the question that comes to mind is, do people understand what they need to do when they make submissions? Because we're not asking whether or not you know, my understanding is that we are asking people to put forward submissions in relation to whether, you know, a particular aspect of the Constitution should be amended or not. And then we're getting people saying that I don't want it to be amended. And we've got 33 out of 54, am I right, Sisanda? That fall under category 1, which means that they fall outside our mandate. And that is a bit worrying, because we would like to see more people, you know, engaging on whether or not they feel a particular aspect of the Constitution should be amended. Secondly, Sisanda, I want to find out that, so if we agree that, okay, those that are under category 2 need a legal opinion, then what happens? We get the legal opinion and then we decide whether or not we recommend that it's desirable in the circumstances that the amendment be made. Is that it? Do we then have to call them to come in as well? I wasn't entirely clear on that. Thirdly, I would like to make a suggestion.
Yes.
This document is very good, but I feel that as it's packaged, it's still a bit, how can I say, it's too dense. Can I suggest that you have a table? So the first column would be the number, and then the content of the submission, as in the subject matter of the submission, and then the category under which it falls under. And then from there, you then indicate what we've done. In that way, we're able to track all these submissions. And when you've sent out a letter, especially around category 1 submissions, you know, indicating that these fall outside the mandate of the committee, then you indicate that the letter was sent on this day, and, you know, the letter has been sent. Category 2, when you request a legal opinion, you indicate that the legal opinion was requested on this date and we received it on this date. That way we're able to track. And then as well as the category 3, that way you'll be able to just be able to track the committee's work. In that way we'll have it in one document instead of having it in because this document is quite bulky. It's over 40 pages. But I'm not criticizing the work. It's very good. It makes our life easier, but I'm just suggesting that it's packaged in a clearer, you know, format, so that we are able to track as a committee. Because I find that with Parliament, we are very good at saying, okay, this is the work that we have to do, but how do we track the work that we're doing and you know, the outcomes therein? So it's very important. Even where we refer something to a particular committee, we have to have a way of being able to say, okay, at the end, we've referred so many submissions to this committee and that committee. And that way we're able to follow up either with the chairpersons or the secretariat of that committee to make sure that indeed, you know, our work comes to fruition, because it's not enough to just say, okay, it's desirable or not, but we've got to see it through until the end. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thanks, Mimi. But colleagues, I thought this presentation, the 50-something pages presentation, is a summary of thousands and thousands of documentation that they have received. So what we are expected to do, I agree with some of your proposal, but the colleagues as well will come in here, that maybe now let's get about saying under category 1, these are the matters that were raised. Just by bullet form is point 20, submission 22, this was the issue. And submission 34, like that and that and that. 2, under category 3, 2, and it also listed like that, because that would be a high-level summary. But for now, it was important for us to get at least some detailed background of those many or thick documents that they have been going through it. Members, I don't know whether my input is assisting the committee, that this one is the first summary of the documentation. Now we can have a 1-pager where you just blow it in 4 squares horizontally. Category 1, these were the submission. Category 2, these were submission. Category 3, these were submission. Those that we recommended to be invited are this and this and this and that and that and that, after getting the legal opinion. But Sisanda, you can come through as well. Sisanda?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you so much for the appreciation for the work. And I also appreciate Dr. Ngondwe's guidance, and also your guidance, Co-Chair, because it will take us having an executive summary first to just officially table everything, instead of members going through the original emails which were sent. But members can cross-reference to those original emails to also satisfy themselves that this summary is in fact emanating from what was submitted. So from this point, if members are in agreement, which I sense is the case with this categorization, we can now go into a tabulated representation of this work before the committee, where I will then use the advices of Dr. Ngondwe of having the dates of when we have written to people to say we have referred your matter to the PC on police, or whether your matter is not in line with the committee work. And after this meeting, it will be easier for me to then have the high-level presentation, because members would be aware of all the issues and also be aware of the method of work, and have now given me input into how they would like the work to look going forward. So I will take all these advices into consideration, and it then condense the work further. And then yes, the idea with regard to people not being sure of what the work of the committee is and why it's so many submissions. I've been speaking to the committee secretary, and we have realized that people have kind of mistaken this process, or this year's process, as part of the Section 25 amendment, even though people were not clear in their emails saying that, you know, do not amend Section 25. We perhaps had only one submitter who was clear, but I think in the mind of South Africans, they were applying their proposals to saying that they do not want to see Section 25 of the Constitution amended, and therefore the Constitution, the way it is, it should be left. So they might have confused the process of these committees inviting for public submissions on changing the Constitution with regard to the draft constitutional bill. So we will then also write to the ones who were explicit, saying that Section 25, they don't want to see change, and update them on parliamentary processes on that. And then we will have a more high-level presentation once members agree on this way forward. The idea with also the legal advice is that the way the submitters have submitted, the legal advice assists members to have their contributions, or to make a decision on the desirability once they hear the legal stance from our legal services. So the idea is that because of the technical nature of of the way the submissions have been done, the legal will help us condense it further so that members can then easily say it is desirable or undesirable based on the quoted case law or based on whatever laws which will be passed in relation to what is being proposed. So, and also inviting submitters is something which we have done in the past because they need to be included in this process of review. We cannot just receive their written submissions. We also need to give them an opportunity to express themselves on it and members interact with them, which is how the committee has previously worked. Because of the serious nature of amending the constitution, people must be given an opportunity to express themselves and answer any clarity seeking questions. So that is also just to assist the committee, and where we also want to invite PENSALB or any stakeholders who are relevant for the submissions. We need to also invite those people so that when a committee arrives at its decision, it would have been supported by the person who submitted, by legal, and also by experts in the field. And therefore we make a final recommendation to Parliament on the desirability based on an informed decision. So that was the idea behind me suggesting that we should proceed the way the committee has been working in the past. Thank you, members.
Comrade, co-chairperson.
Yes, Chair.
I just wanted to say that while I agree with the good observations made by Dr. Gondwe, I don't think that they detract from the good work that Sasanda has done, but they help us as to going forward. How should we approach the work? I fully support subject to that comment, but I was just wondering with regard to the question whether the public understand what is required of them, whether we couldn't have a pamphlet just outlining how this process works so that there's no confusion of the different processes that happen in Parliament. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Any other comment, members?
Yeah.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, I agree fully with Honorable Motega's suggestion around the pamphlet, because remember, as Parliament, we also have a duty to inform members of the public so that they are able to participate fully in the processes of Parliament. And where they don't understand what we're doing, then because we've not communicated that effectively as well, because there's a duty to inform and educate members of the public, then they are not able to participate fully in our processes. So I agree 100% that we do need a pamphlet that even will have a sample submission on how a submission should look like, that type of thing, to empower members of the public to be able to, interact with the committee, fully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc. I hope you taking note, pilot, on those matters. So going forward, members, let me check if any other comments on these matters so that I can hand over to my colleague chair to ensure that he give us a highly summary of our discussion for today. Any other contribution, members, that wants to engage on the presentation? I don't see any hands here. Since there's no hands, colleagues, am I right that firstly, we agreed about the categorization of these matters that are presented to us today by our content advisor, and we highly appreciate the consolidation of this report. And two, that the committee also agrees that whenever you see that there's an item that has been wrongly categorized, let's also give a space to say you can still write it to the chairs and also to the content advisor, and then we see how do we categorize that, how do we take it that issue into the right content. In the next meeting, we will always report on such changes if there were other changes. And secondly, we agreed about the table that is going to be redesigned, which further summarize what is already been summarized in front of us, whereby I see, just thinking aloud, the matter of one, all the items that falls under category 1, and which are those items. Those that falls under category 2, which are those items, and and category 3, and those that need to do the referrals, which also going to have some bit of notes which indicate the date and as to when it was referred. So those are the issues that I think the committee agrees on it, Sesanda. And lastly, it's a matter of taking these matters forward from there. The professor has also suggested that, I think, and Mimi Doc also suggested that, I think it would be important that we must have sort of like a pamphlet, even for us as members, that we can have it, which explains to the public the process as to what was our expectation, what did we have received, how are we processing these matters going forward. Because even next year, it will be the same thing, that we still had to receive submission, so that people, when they submit, we will always make reference as to say, this is what the process is all about, so that everybody will be aware of how this committee operates. I don't know, members, if I've left out any other deliberation that we have agreed upon for this meeting. Let me check it from the members who are here. Marshall, I've seen you have joined us as well. Welcome.
There's nothing on my side here.
Yes, Doc.
There's nothing on my side. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Marshall. Any other members that want to raise anything? Thank you. Let me hand over to my co-chair, Dr. Motseha. Thank you very much for allowing me to share this meeting. Thank you, members.
Co-chair, thank you very much for directing us very, very well. I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't agree on what we could define as work in progress, where we would request legal opinions, where we would request people to address us, but also have a category of matters that we think they are ripe to be taken forward, so that we don't become a committee that deliberates for centuries without reaching a conclusions. Here I'm trying to say that there may be matters that are ripe or should be ripe soon for referral, for recommendation to Parliament, with a view to referring them to the appropriate committees that must take the way forward. Just that distinction. For instance, if you take the question of Kilobedu, the question of sign language has been dealt with. If we have any such matters, that we isolate them, then prepare a report to Parliament, so that Parliament can then refer them to the appropriate committees, so that there are products from the work that we do as a committee. But otherwise, I just want to thank Comrade Isanda and her team for the brilliant way in which she approaches the work, and also appreciate the members' contribution, because this helps us to improve on our work. This is a new territory for all of us, and I think we learn as we go on, but the support that we get is a high quality support. So I don't know if Honorable Mashele still wants to come in, but I think I would rest my case there.
I don't think so, Chair. You can close your meeting.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think the two of us and the Secretariat will look on the way forward and see what needs to be done further, and how soon we can convene again. But for today, thank you very much for directing the meeting so well, and thanks for Sisanda for always preparing adequately for these meetings, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you, chairpersons. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Chair.